Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Kasey. Kasey, welcome to the show.
Ben, thank you for having me. Glad to be here. Happy to have this conversation.
I love it. Well, Kasey, you have such an awesome and interesting background. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your background before we get started with the episode today?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background spans a wide array of industries. So 15 years of consumer marketing experience across large global billion-dollar brands, Great Clips, Solo Cup, Virgin Mobile. A little bit of experience in the health IT space. And then about 2 years ago, I transitioned to a company called Citywide. We're a B2B organization, franchise company throughout the United States and North America.
I love it. So today we're going to talk about the importance of storytelling and how you can connect with individuals through storytelling and why it's important and how you do it. And that's kind of the main subject for today that we're going to dive into. But Kasey, why is storytelling important? Do brands actually have something worth saying, and how do they say it? What's your approach when it comes to storytelling in general?
You know, the whole adage of people buy from people really is true, right? People want to buy from brands that mean something, that have a purpose, and they're buying from the people who represent those brands. So my belief is every brand has a story to tell, and the big challenging thing from a marketing perspective is how do you tell that? The beautiful thing about storytelling for me is it decommoditizes your service, right? You want your product to be good, right? But how do you stand out, right? There's a ton of different shoes in the market that all do the same thing. The brands that are winning are the brands that are able to differentiate themselves, stand out, have something that they stand for. And the only way that you can do that is by telling your brand story and putting content out there that's meaningful and impactful to your consumer.
I love that. And one of the biggest ways to differentiate with stories, like you're saying, is if you can tell your consumer story really, really well, where you feel like you're actually being heard and this brand is telling your story, you say, oh, well, cool. Like, there's obviously a relationship that should be built here because this needs to be a part of my story. In the past, how have you found good stories to tell for brands? And how have you been able to really leverage those opportunities to let your consumers and prospects actually start to connect with you and the business?
The interesting thing for me in my career is, the industries that I've worked in haven't always been the sexiest industries, right? So I worked for a hair care company, right? And then I worked for a cell phone company and a plastic cup company. So you look at those and say, well, how do you make a plastic cup fun, right? So my time at Solo Cup, really the value there and our approach there was we're not the reason people get together, but we're always part of the celebration, always part of the party, right? So if somebody was having a bad experience with our product, it wasn't because of the cup, right? It was because of the people that they were around. Really for us at Solo Cup, for example, was how do you capture those experiences that friends and family are coming together to have? How do you capture that and use that to tell the story, right? They don't care that our cup was square. They don't care that our cup was more sturdy. It had grips on the side. No, they wanted to relive and celebrate those moments that they have. Everybody has a story that they remember where they have that red cup in hand, and it doesn't matter what's in that red cup, but it was about the experiences, what they were doing, right? So working with, our consumers and capturing those experiences and really letting the consumer tell us what their experience with our product means to them, that was a huge success for us. And that's what differentiated us from our competitors. Did it so much that to this day, people think that every red cup is a Solo Cup. And I think, again, that speaks to the value of the story behind the product and, how that brand has been able to leverage that and tell that story.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Another great example time at a health IT company, and we produced the technology behind when you went into a hospital or a clinic and your doctor and nurse were taking notes. We produced that technology that captured that. So again, it was, we weren't saving people's lives, but we were playing a part in helping doctors, nurses make very important decisions to impact the health of others. So it was a lot of going to our clients and using those use cases and finding those emotional purse strings to pull, right? And tell the impact of, it's not that, our product made it easier or there are less steps to input patient data. It was, what was that hospital and that doctor and that nurse able to do to make their patients' lives better and tell these amazing stories of improving health, improving happiness, efficiency, and making these communities happier and healthier. And you find those stories, and then it's about taking those pieces and cutting them up into episodic content that really sells the meaning, the emotion, the empathy behind your product and service.
I love that. Yeah, and something that really stood out to me that I don't know if I've ever really thought about as much is when you were talking about that is really our objective as marketers. Everyone talks about storytelling. It's not necessarily to create the story, it's to effectively retell the story. The business's objective is to create stories, like you said with your solo cup. And there's so many stories. The product brought stories, and it inherently was a part of all of those parties and celebrations and everything. The real journey for the marketing team was to discover and then retell. And like you said, kind of how do we portray this in the best way possible? How do we bring out the emotion that really came from the original storyteller? It's almost like a documentary kind of an idea, it was a historical event. How do we bring the emotion out from what happened, in the past? And I think there's something special about how you've approached that and how you find the emotional stories and then figure out, okay, cool, how do we give it the light of day and how do we make it really, really shine? I think there's something really powerful there.
It's an interesting point about that. We spend so much time as marketers of, we have this new product, we have this new feature. But if you look at this year, what have been the most impactful stories that have come out, right? We have the ocean spray guy on a skateboard. Just recently, we had the Stanley Cup, right? The Stanley mug in the car that caught fire.
Yep.
And then the North Face story where the lady was hiking, right? And the jacket wasn't working, so North Face came out, right? All three of those stories weren't created by the brand. They were reactions by the brand. And one of the challenging things as marketers is kind of stepping out of our own way and not dictating the story and letting our customers tell that story. And like you said, just using that and leveraging that to, reinforce the story is, we have this picture in our mind of what our brand stands for, but listen to what your customers are saying, listen to what that data is saying, and they'll tell the story for you if you just get out of your own way.
I love it. So we've used a lot of examples when it comes to B2C. If you're in a B2B market and you have a lot of experience in both areas, so I'm really fascinated to get your specific take on it. And B2C, what are the differences when it comes to discovering stories, telling stories, the distribution of those stories? How can B2B marketers also be effective in that same process, in your opinion? And what have you seen work?
One of the big ahas for me this year has been the discovery and acceptance that a B2B brand, so we're in the building maintenance, commercial maintenance industry, not a very sexy industry to be in. But our customer is still a human, right? At the end of the day, right? We're all humans and we're talking with humans, dealing with humans. And some of the principles of the educational content and some of the humor, especially in today's age where people just want positive things in their life, right? It's a tough time out there. So from the B2B side, there's still room and opportunity to be informative, educational. And I hate to admit this, but like the memes, right? We're a meme generation. Memes for us, they still have a role and an impact on the content that we created. One of the most successful pieces of content that we've created over the past 18 months. You remember that meme? It's the meme of the two buttons where there's two options and the guy's sweating and he doesn't know which button to push. So we took that and repurposed it for our brand, right? And we clean toilets and sweep floors. One of the most engaging pieces of content for us. So there are things that you can do that, the consumer, that you think, oh, the consumer, it's so easy on the consumer side. They have so much fun. It's such a great product. And it's so easy to tell a story. Even if you're a product or a service, you can take those learnings and, become a human, humanize your brand. At the end of the day, what people want to be, they want to be educated, they want to be informed, and they want to have fun and be lighthearted. And you can do that and still sell a product, still sell a service. But, the days of just, again, highlighting feature service, I think have been long gone. And there's a lot of things that we can learn from these innovative brands that you can take into the B2B space and execute and find value in.
Yeah, I love that. So when you, in your current role, are looking for stories, where do you go to find them? How do you go and typically source some of this material? Like you talked about being personal and telling stories. How do you personally do the outreach or build relationships with customers in such a way that they feel comfortable sharing this with you?
Yeah, it's very interesting, right? So early on here at my role, we needed case studies. We didn't have a lot of case studies and we needed that social proof, that we could put out there and help validate ourselves. And, I put a message out to our franchisees. Hey, do you have any unique stories that you can tell? Any cool buildings, cool industries that you're working with, cool projects that you've worked with? Zilch, didn't get anything, right? So I went back and said, you know what, I think we have the wrong approach, right? Because I'm going at it from a product perspective of, tell me a cool building that you've cleaned. Well, a building's a building, right? It doesn't matter if it's church, a school, a hospital. That's not the part. So I then went back to the franchisees and their staff and said, tell me about a client that gave you positive feedback of, you did a great service, right? Uncovered those stories and said, okay, so it's not about the building that you're cleaning. It's about the people that you're interacting with. And, I shared with the story here of again, an independent contractor that one of our locations has been working with, who's helped grow their business, right? And then, working with our franchisees of how are you impacting the communities? And there's a lot of great stories. We had a franchisee in Indianapolis who was on the board for the Alzheimer's Foundation, and he was able to help the Alzheimer's Foundation raise over $1 million. And his specific location raised $100,000 just by themselves, right? That's an awesome story to tell. That if I would have went at it at that, tell me about a cool building that you've cleaned or a cool project that you did, would have never uncovered that. So I think that marketers need to kind of take a look at what's that next layer down that's not as obvious, and then reaching out to your customers and just listening to your customers. For me, my customer is our franchisees and the contractors that we use. It's not the end building that we clean. So listening to those folks and just understanding what's going on in their business and again, taking a look at the data saying, okay, we have a big project that we just picked up in Jacksonville and it was for a amphitheater. Okay, there's something cool that we can learn. Tell me more about this. That again, if you just ask, tell me about something cool, people are going to shut down. So you got to go a little bit deeper, look in some of those darker holes and some of those holes that may have cobwebs in there that you wouldn't normally go. That's where really the fun, unique, engaging content begins. And then it's up to us to kind of dig out and formulate and put that story together. But you got to look in kind of the non-obvious areas first.
I love that. And I love how quickly you get to the emotional tie of those stories. The people that are like, you know what, like, sure, the product's cool and everything, but here's how it made an impact. Here's how I feel about it. Here's how I feel about my life now and my job and those around me, how they look at me. And getting to those core emotions. I love it. I love how well you are able to kind of hone in on those elements. So, well, as promised, this has gone by super quickly. This is super informative. Thank you. This has definitely changed how I look at really sourcing, finding, and telling stories of my customers and people around me. Kasey, thank you for the time. If anyone wants to connect with you online and further the conversation, what's a good place that they can reach out and connect with you?
You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. And then unlike a lot of people, I still love Twitter/X. So I'm Cam Scala on Twitter. You'll hear a lot about the Kansas City Chiefs, but I promise I also share some insightful content there. So LinkedIn or Twitter, Cam Scala.
Okay, I love it. Perfect. Well, again, thank you for the time. I appreciate it. And we'll have to have you back on the show. So many good insights. Thanks again for the time.
Thanks for the opportunity, Ben. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.